Hello, I'm Jonasz Rywinski. Welcome on board the Eastern Express. But as always, I hope you enjoy the journey. On this episode, we're diving into a story that reads like the script of a political thriller. Armenia and Turkey, two nations with a long, turbulent history, are trying to mend fences. Sounds intriguing, right? Ankara and Yerevan's historical grievances date back over a century, casting a long shadow over any attempts at normalization. Despite this, in recent years there has been a flicker of hope for improving relations. So without further ado, let's look into how these two countries are trying to mend it.
Following a 2-year hiatus in negotiations, appointed envoys from Turkey and Armenia have held a new round of talks aimed at normalizing relations between the countries. Ankara severed diplomatic and trade relations with Armenia in 1993, electing to support Azerbaijan during the conflict the two countries had over the Nagorno-Karabakh region. What is more, in recent years, Turkey has deepened its political and military ties with ethnic Turkish Azeris. Since the end of the war, however, Turkey, a NATO member, has been working to repair its historically tense relations with Armenia, emphasizing that all normalization efforts depend on Yerevan's progress in peace talks with Azerbaijan. Counting this week's meeting on the Turkish-Armenian border, the country's special representatives have held 5 rounds of talks so far. The last official meeting between the officials took place in July 2022, yet the representatives also met on the sidelines of a diplomatic forum in southern Turkey earlier this year. Apart from the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh, Turkey and Armenia's biggest obstacle to overcome is the memory of the 1915 massacre of 1.5 million Armenians who were killed by the Ottoman Empire, the predecessor of modern Turkey. Armenia considers the act genocide. While Turkey acknowledges that many Armenians living in the Ottoman Empire died in clashes with Ottoman forces during World War I, it disputes these figures and denies that systemic ethnic killings took place.
And now, as always, it's time to take a closer look at the issue in greater detail. So Armenia and Turkey have a fraught relationship, to put it mildly. Despite that, leaders on both sides have signaled a willingness to turn a new page. Fast forward to now, and we have Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, who has been quite vocal about the potential benefits of normalizing relations with Turkey. Pashinyan is like the optimistic protagonist in our story, envisioning a future where open borders and economic cooperation bring prosperity to both nations. It is a compelling vision, but one that's easier said than done. Why, you may ask? Well, the normalization process between Armenia and Turkey has been likened to a road to nowhere. It is a journey filled with good intentions, but plagued by potholes and detours. So let me provide you with a bit of a backstory here. In 2009, there was a significant attempt to normalize relations, known as the Zurich Protocols. Both countries signed agreements aimed at establishing diplomatic ties and opening the border. However, the deal quickly fell apart due to domestic opposition and geopolitical pressures, leaving the protocols dead in the water. So what is different this time around? Nikol Pashinyan believes that regional dynamics have shifted enough to give peace a chance. He points to the recent conflict over Nagorno-Karabakh, where Armenia faced a harsh reality check and realized that isolation was no longer a viable strategy. The conflict highlighted the need for Armenia to diversify its foreign relations and reduce its dependency on Russia, opening a window for rapprochement with Ankara. Turkey, on the other hand, sees strategic and economic opportunities in normalizing relations with Armenia. The potential benefits of peace are undeniable. Improved relations could unlock economic opportunities, enhance regional stability and provide a sense of closure for historical wounds. It is a classic case of mutual benefit, at least on paper. But remember, this is international politics, where the paper often serves as the shakiest of foundations. One major sticking point is the precondition from Turkey regarding the recognition of Armenian genocide. Ankara insists that Armenia drop its campaign for international recognition of the genocide as a prerequisite for normalization. Now, this is a non-starter for many Armenians, for whom recognition is a matter of historical justice and national identity. Another challenge is the role of Azerbaijan. Turkey and Azerbaijan are close allies, often described as one nation, two states. Any move by Turkey to normalize relations with Armenia must consider Azerbaijan's interests. The trilateral dynamics are akin to a complicated love triangle, where every move by one party affects the other two. Domestically, both Pashinyan and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan face significant opposition to normalization. In Armenia, nationalist factions view any concession to Turkey as a betrayal of their history and sovereignty. In Turkey, hardliners see little benefit in making amends with a small, economically struggling neighbor. In short, it's a tough sell on both sides, requiring political courage and a fair bit of diplomatic sleight of hand. So, are Armenia and Turkey on a genuine path to reconciliation, or are we witnessing yet another chapter in a long saga of missed opportunities and broken promises? The truth is, it is too early to tell. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Ilkan Dalkuc, director of Daktilo 1984 platform. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Always good to be here.
So, the prospective normalization between Turkey and Armenia, to what extent do you think that these latest developments, the fact that this is once again moving forward, is the product of Armenia's rather precarious situation, that it has lost a few of its notable allies and now it is looking for an opportunity, basically create a new safe environment around itself, and that requires normalization with Turkey, among other things?
That's pretty correct. And other than that, I can easily add Turkey also wants to normalize its relationship with Armenia, because maybe you don't know that Turkish northwestern border towns are the poorest areas in Turkey, and they also suffer from the closed border with Armenia, because they don't actually trade, and they actually suffer from the lack of tourism and trade in that areas. And I'm pretty sure that the opening of the borders, or the prospect of opening of the borders, even that can also affect their economies on that area. And other than that, Turkey is not a favorable character in the Western eyes. So the normalization of the period with Armenia is very favorable for Turkish image and Turkish relationship with vessels. So I can easily add that. And other than that, the two sides of the story, Turkey and Armenia, will both enjoy this kind of normalization. Is pretty sure.
But although this is mutually beneficial, and it has been mutually beneficial for quite a while, the entire process has been fraught with difficulties. Negotiations would begin, then they would stall, then they would be initiated once more. And it has actually taken quite a while without any tangible progress being seen. So what would you say was or could be the decisive factor here, the one that will allow this process to finally reach a mutually beneficial conclusion?
I mean, Turkey would like to reach a normalization with Armenia, but Turkey also is affected by the position of Azerbaijan. When Azerbaijan is at war with Armenia, Turkey cannot open its borders. I mean, the situation with Turkey and Armenia, the problems about the genocide and this kind of issues are secondary issues in reality. The real issue was Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. And since Azerbaijan basically solved this conflict to its own to its own agenda, Turkey, Azerbaijan don't need to veto the Turkish relationships with Armenia. I mean, that is a real and solid possibility and solid hope with Turkey and Armenia, because other than that, Armenia is lying between the borders of Turkey and Azerbaijan. If Turkey and Azerbaijan wants to build stronger ties between them, they also need the allowance of Armenia also. I mean, these three countries can come together when there is no border conflicts.
And of course, there are issues such as the Nakhchivan exclave and all that would benefit from cooperation, especially between Armenia and Azerbaijan. But what about the political side of things? It is fairly obvious that there is going to be naysayers, especially in Armenia. Nikol Pashinyan is already facing fierce opposition over the basically allegedly going soft on Azerbaijan, allowing for certain concessions to be made, earlier on losing the long-standing conflict. So Azerbaijan effectively took what was theirs according to international law, but naturally this is going to be something that's not very well received in Armenia itself. So now, adding to that possible concessions towards Turkey, there have already been suggestions that Pashinyan is going to make some sort of concessions. He's going to essentially walk back on the long-standing position concerning 1915 and what Armenia has long held to be a genocide by the Ottoman Empire. So would you say that this perhaps might be beneficial for Pashinyan and for the majority of people in Armenia, but a vocal minority could still derail this process?
Yes, there is a possibility that possibility we have on hand. But other than that, the concessions with Turkey would help Pashinyan economically. We all know that Turkey is, even if suffers some difficulties, has a vibrant economy. Turkey has a nearly 19 million population, and even the tourism income can, even the tourism and trade can really rise the economic conditions in Armenia also. We all know that Armenia suffers deeply in the economic part. So with the reopening these borders, reopening these gates can really help Pashinyan to find an economic ground to his political positions, because we all know that pro-Russian minorities and pro-Russian opposition to Pashinyan in Armenia cannot propose an economical economical increase in Armenian positions, because we all know that Armenia suffers deeply in economic wise, because Armenia is lying between Turkey and Azerbaijan. If Armenia still stands as an enemy to these two states, Armenia cannot really stand economically very in a favorable position.
So perhaps the only problem here is that in a democratic country, it's way easier to actually sell arguments based on emotions, based on ideology, because economy, well, it takes a while to take effect, right? I mean, you cannot say, look, we're going to be better off in 10 years, 5 years, but everyone's going to be okay, but what about now? Coming back to what you said about the pro-Russian direction among some of the members of the public, even some very vocal ones, would you say that the fact that Armenia and Russia are no longer on the same page, clearly there has been a falling out, that this also compelled Armenia to make amends with not only a major neighbor, but also a member of NATO, which would perhaps suggest that there might be at least some sort of fairly discreet American involvement there, like, a diplomatic message, look, you need to actually solve this before we can move forward with a rapprochement?
I mean, United States may give a guarantee to the Armenian borders. We can easily say it. But the United States' ability to give that guarantee will be on the NATO ground, so that United States wants an Armenia with respected and reasonable relationship with Turkey. When Armenia and Turkey has good relations, United States can offer such guarantees to Armenia, and West can offer such guarantees to Armenia. When Turkey and Armenian relationships are in a civil manner, as you said before, European Union and NATO can easily intervene this kind of issues in Caucasia, in Southern Caucasus.
And also, I mean, Turkey is respected by Russia. That's one factor that's important. That probably Armenia probably sees that, you know, it's not likely that it would join NATO within any sort of foreseeable future. But having Turkey on its side, and perhaps at the expense of some sort of historical issues and disputes, would be a major argument for Armenia to be able to break away from Russia, saying, okay, but now we have a very powerful neighbor. We have just fixed our relations. And it is fairly easy to assume that Russia would not really want to mess with Turkish interests in the region, because they already know that Turkey is not a country that is going to just say, oh, we are expressing a deep concern. They are going to act if their interests are in danger.
You are totally correct. Also, I am pretty sure that today you cover some issues about Iran, and Armenia is also bordering Iran, and the Western interests are really lies on to taking Armenia away from Iran. And when Turkey and Armenia is getting closer, Armenia can be stand far away from Iran. We all know that Armenia is a key country to connect Russia and Iran. And when Armenia is getting closer to Turkey, it's on Western interest also.
Well, also Armenia would be important for connections running not vertically but horizontally, so to say. When we, for example, think about trade between Central Asia and Europe, it is rather difficult to do that without having Armenia, at least, if not on board, then at least, in a peaceful relationship with its neighbors, right?
Yeah, you are totally correct. We all know that Europe has energy interests in Central Asia and Caspian region, and Armenia may be a key factor to this kind of trade and transport. With Turkey and Armenia is in close connection. European problems in long run can be solved with the help of Armenian participation.
So overall, this is a situation that seems to be about not only mutual benefit, but really a win-win scenario to most of those involved, perhaps apart from Russia. And if Russia doesn't really want this to happen, it may continue to interfere in many different ways. Hopefully this is not going to be the case here, but of course it cannot be excluded. Ilkan Dalkric was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
See you.
And now we're moving on to Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you really don't want to miss. Chinese banks return about 80% of Russian money transfers in yuan. Chinese authorities have been tightening transfer requirements since December 2023, when the US implemented sanctions against third country institutions for cooperating with companies subject to anti-Russian sanctions.
Following the new US sanctions, payments began to be delayed by weeks and often cancelled without explanation. As a result, the client incurs losses both on the exchange rate and re-evaluation and still pays a commission. Goods sometimes reach Russia despite the Chinese supplier not receiving any money for 5 to 6 months. Deliveries are often continued on a post-payment basis. As a consequence, Russian companies increasingly have to use the services of intermediaries, payment agents or trade houses. Another way to circumvent Western sanctions used by Russian companies is to use cryptocurrencies as a means of payment in international deals, but this also involves some difficulties in execution and losses on conversion and fees to intermediaries.
Hungary's recent decision to allow Russian and Belarusian citizens to enter the country more easily has sparked criticism in the European Union. The bloc's officials warn the change could open the door to espionage activities.
In a letter to the European Council's President Charles Michel, Manfred Weber, head of the European People's Party, said the Hungarian move raised serious concerns about national security. Earlier this month, Hungary published details of a new expedited visa system for citizens of 8 countries, including Russia and Belarus, allowing entry into Hungary without security checks and other restrictions. Budapest said many of those people will be employed in Hungary during the construction of a nuclear power plant, contracted by Russia's Rosatom. Russian citizens are not at risk of being banned from entering the EU and the Schengen zone as long as they have a valid visa and are not linked to Russian dictator Vladimir Putin.
German citizen Rico Krieger, sentenced to death by a Belarusian court on terrorism charges, has been pardoned by the country's authoritarian leader, Alexander Lukashenko. According to the human rights organization Vyasna, it was the first trial for mercenary activity in Belarusian history.
The details of Krieger's case were not known until human rights group Vyasna reported that he had been sentenced to death in June for mercenary activity, terrorism, forming an extremist group, intentionally damaging a vehicle, and illegal operations using firearms and explosives. Prior to his decision, Lukashenko convened a meeting with the head of the Belarusian KGB, Krieger's lawyer, and a journalist working for a state-owned newspaper who recently published details of the trial against Krieger. Lukashenko's office did not provide any additional information on the pardon. Last week, Belarusian state television aired a video showing Krieger behind bars in handcuffs, apologizing for the crimes he was convicted of. The practice of recording individuals after their arrest for so-called repugnant films made under apparent duress has been common in Belarus for years.
Following the 2021 exit of US-led forces from Afghanistan, some of the nation's diplomatic missions continued to pledge allegiance to the country's former government. Now, the ruling Taliban have confirmed that they have elected to fully cut ties with 14 of the country's diplomatic missions.
The move, which is to take effect immediately, is likely to cause further difficulties for Afghan citizens living abroad. The decision refers to passports, visas and other consular documents issued by Afghan missions in London, Belgium, Berlin, Bonn, Switzerland, Austria, France, Italy, Greece, Poland, Sweden, Norway, Canada and Australia. Afghans in the countries affected by the move were urged to seek consular and embassy services in the diplomatic missions controlled by the Taliban, such as in China and Pakistan. Afghanistan's Taliban government has not been recognized by any country in the world. Many of its leaders are subject to international sanctions, with the country's seat at the United Nations still occupied by former Afghan President Ashraf Ghani's government.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.